Hello and welcome. I'm Zahra Sethna, host of the Collapse Life podcast. Today we have with us a legend in the sustainable food movement. He's been at the vanguard of it for decades. Joel Salatin is owner of Polyface Farm in Virginia. He's an author, he gives lectures around the world, and he's known for his healing the land approach to farming. Today he's here to talk with us about the antidotes to our centralized food system and how we can feed the planet sustainably. Joel, we're so pleased to have you on the show. It's such a pleasure to meet you in person. We've been following you for many years.
Oh, it's my privilege and honor to be with you, Zara.
Thank you so much. So, you've actually been one of the main people who's shown America and the world that regenerative agriculture is actually not only possible, but profitable. So, I wanted to just start in by kind of having you talk a little bit about that. Your farm's motto is healing the land one bite at a time, which is beautiful. So tell us a little bit about that. What does it mean to you and just about your farm and what brought you there?
Yeah, well, too often we have this tension in our minds that there is that ecology and economy are diametrically opposed. That in order to be an a profitable farm, you have to sacrifice the ecology, and in order to be an ecological farm, you have to sacrifice the economy, and that goes beyond farming, in other sectors of life. And what we have found here is that the two are actually symbiotic. They're not competitive. They're actually symbiotic. Um, but the problem that I think the tension comes when people try um, to compromise too much and and make general changes. For example, 95% of organic chicken, organic certified that carries an organic certification label, is still coming from factory farms. Now,
Mm.
they require the chickens to be able to range outside, but what they do is they just make big factory farms with little pop holes in them, and the chickens are intimidated from going outside, and so they don't go outside. And so basically, you have a non-chemical factory farm. I mean, that's what you end up with the same fecal particulate problems. You have the same a lot of the same issues. Perhaps not as big a house and not as tight quarters. Fair enough, but you have similar things. Dairy. Dairy cows by organic certification are supposed to be on pasture, but we have big 10,000 cow confinement dairy operations that the U.S. I call it the U.S. Is certifying organic in direct contradiction to the organic standards, and so when I talk about ecological, I'm not talking about a little 5% deviation from industrial. I'm talking about a 180-degree shift from from the industrial paradigm to a completely different paradigm, and that is where we see the great big differences. For example, most commercial organic farms are actually just substituting chemical fertilizer for purchased in, some sort of biological amendment. On our farm, our fertilizer is generated in house in a carbon economy where our fertilizer budget is a great big industrial chipper that we use to chip dead, dying, crooked, junk trees to weed and upgrade the woodlot, convert that biomass so that we can compost it. The compost then becomes our fertilizer, and so it's done in situ, in house. And so when Putin invaded Ukraine and the fertilizer bills, jumped by 400%, it didn't affect us at all because we were completely disentangled. And so a lot of this tension, I think, is because people aren't willing to completely release the industrial chemical paradigm, and they want to just release 10 or 20, 30% of it, and straddle the fence. And when you straddle the fence, you just rip your pants. And so we have been very blessed to just be free to go the opposite direction completely, and that's made a lot of difference.
Why do you think that people are hesitant or resistant? I mean, we've gone from family farms to factory farms in America over a very short period of time, and so when you're talking to other farmers and you're spreading the word about what you do, or when people ask you about it, what is the resistance? What stops them?
Well, generally the resistance is, well, there are several things. I mean, one is simply peer dependency. What are they going to say about me? Farmers are very pretty tight, close knit, fraternity now. I mean, realize that America now has almost twice as many people incarcerated in prison as we have farmers. So there just aren't that many of us. I mean, the Census Bureau took us off the census form, so they don't even measure farmers anymore. They do measure, prison inmates, but they don't measure farmers anymore. We're not even a voting block that's worth discussing. And so there's a lot of a peer dependency in among farmers. I'm concerned about what they'll say down at the feed store, or down at the auction house, or the grain bin, whatever. That's one. The second one is that all the farmers alive today have grown up in this chemical industrial age where life biology is considered fundamentally mechanical, and that to me is the single biggest worldview or mindset difference between what I do, what we do here, the way we view farming and life and food, even that it is fundamentally biological and not mechanical. And so when you are that far apart in mental thinking, it's very difficult to convert 100%. People like to make little deviations, but they don't like to make 100% deviations. And so what happens then is that this new thinking becomes intimidating and becomes emotionally, mentally, and socially intimidating, because, well, I didn't grow up thinking like this. I didn't, uh, and so that unknown out there is intimidating. I had a neighbor, actually. We actually had one neighbor. He's passed away now, but he came to me, I don't know what, 15 years ago, and he said, "I've been watching you all my life." He was about 10 years older than I was. He came to me and he said, "I've been watching you all my lifetime. I think you're on the right track. Can you help me get started?" He's the only neighbor in all of our 60 years here who ever came to me and said, he appreciated what we were doing. And so I helped him get started. And the day before his cows came into the field, that we'd put in water line and fencing so he could do controlled grazing and start, doing what we do with our mob stocking, herbivorous, solar conversion, lignified carbon sequestration, fertilization. And he got really quiet. I could tell he was really disturbed. I said, "Oakley, are you okay?" His name was Oakley. And he said, "I'm scared." Now this is a man. He was a machinist operator at a factory. He was burly. I mean, the guy was stronger than I was. He was an ox of a guy. He said, "I'm scared." I said, "What are you scared about?" He said, "Well, I haven't done this before. I don't know what the neighbors will say." And he ran through all this litany that I just ran through, and it was one of the most tender. In fact, I might not even say it without tearing up. It was one of those tender man to man encounters I've ever had out at there, in his field, nobody around. And I just took him and I said, "Oakley, we're gonna hold your hand. We're not gonna let you fail, and we're gonna get you through this." But that illustrated to me the power and the strength of a paradigm, of a mindset. And so it's not just ignorance. It's not just naivety. It is truly an intimidating planet out there of a fear of the unknown. And if you haven't embraced it emotionally and mentally, if you aren't read, I mean, look at these books behind me. I mean, I read. I don't read the stuff that the average farmer reads. I'm steeped in a more biological, ecological. These books I have books about earthworms. You don't find normal farmers reading books about earthworms. Okay, and so he had not done this reading. He had not steeped him. He's just seen what we'd done, and, well, I can do that, and it completely inverted his world,
Mm.
and he was scared to death about it.
And how did it go for him?
He never he tried, and we tried all we could to help him, but as it turned out, he just wasn't able to grasp it all,
Wow.
and eventually turned it all over to us to operate because it was just he just couldn't wrap his head around it, and so we managed things for a couple of years, and then he eventually came to us. He got very ill, and came to us and said, nobody will love this like you would. Would you make me an offer for my land? And we were able to make him an offer, and he is now passed. And of course, our check now goes to his wife. They owner financed, and wonderful neighbors, live just a couple miles away from us, and we were able to preserve all of that relational tenderness throughout all that ordeal. And yeah, it was a good time.
That's good. It's a good outcome. It's so interesting though, because we often think about the mindset shift that's happened for the consumer, how so many of us are now separated from where our food comes from, and children now don't think that food comes from anywhere but a styrofoam plate in the supermarket. We talk about that a lot, but to understand that there's been a similar or kind of parallel mindset shift at the side of the food producer is really an interesting insight. And it actually kind of makes this whole piece a little bit more challenging. So, do you think that there's something that we as consumers can do to help the food producers come across to your way of thinking?
Oh, bless you for asking that question, because as I've just described to you, listen, farmers are not going to come to this. I mean, I go by and I see gullies in field, and I'm thinking, what's that farmer thinking? Can't he see that he's got a 2 foot deep gully erosion coming down his field? I mean, I overgrazing, in the summertime, and the grass is down to it looks like somebody went through with a fingernail clippers and clipped all the grass, and it's just burning up. The soil is baking in the sun, and I'm saying, what's he thinking? I mean, and so that's where I am, and I realize I'm very aware that farmers are not going to make this transition just in mass voluntarily. Now, do farmers come to this? Absolutely, one at a time, dribble, 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 dribble. Okay, but the cultural catalyst for this is the food buyer. It is the food buyer. It's not the farmer. It's the food buyer. Farmers have always met the market. They've always changed to meet the market. If you want more chicken, we grow more chicken. I mean, that's what we're already doing. Okay. If you want more carrots, we'll grow more carrots. If you want long carrots, we'll grow long carrots. If you want fat carrots, we'll grow fat carrots. Okay. Farmers have always adapted to the marketplace. And so the driver's seat in this is the consumer. And of course, I'm a consumer too. I don't grow everything that I eat.
Yeah.
And so we go, an hour and a half up the road. We buy apples from a biological apple orchard, and we buy, 10 or 12 bushels. We come home, we make 100 quarts of applesauce. That's our applesauce for the year. And we eat on apples, and we buy them in seed. We have some apple trees here on the farm that we eat, but anyway, we patronize. And so what can a consumer do? So the first thing a consumer needs to do is get in their kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot have an authentic food system and have as profound an abdication of domestic culinary skill as we have in the developed world. The biggest prophetic mistake, and I don't make prophecies, because I've learned long ago I have no idea what's going to happen in the future. But back long time ago, when I was very naive and would make prophecies, I'd do media interviews. People say, what do you see, whatever, 30, 40 years down the future? And I was confident that by now, or long before now, look at this local food movement, look at the farmers market movement. Oh my goodness, within 20 years, everybody's going to be in their kitchen. They're all going to be cooking, and they're going to be buying from their local farmers. And I mean, we're going to have a food revolution. Well, nothing could have been further from the truth. McDonald's is still building new McDonald's every day, and and the factory farms are getting bigger and bigger and more, and we've moved from antibiotics to mRNA injections in livestock, and we've got hot pockets and Lunchables, and convenience up the wazoo, and people have not embraced their kitchens. They've continued to abdicate their kitchens.
Yeah.
So you can only have as authentic a food system as you have participation in domestic culinary arts, where our kitchens become where our home, the center of our home, returns to the kitchen and not the Netflix subscription and the entertainment center. That is where the big change has to happen. And fortunately, less, some of your listeners, they're typical guy, he doesn't know how much cooking takes, that sort of thing. Well, let me tell you, when I say get in your kitchen, it's not grandma's kitchen. We have hot and cold running water, refrigerators, electric stoves. Okay, we've got crock pots, Instapots, bread makers, ice cream makers, blenders,
Yeah. Air
shredders.
fryers, yeah.
Yeah, we got all sorts of stuff. Okay, so this is not great grandma's kitchen. All right, and you can cook and fix meals from scratch much easier than you could 50 years ago. Much easier. So there's no reason for TV dinners, squeezable Velveeta cheese, and single packet things. I've come to the conclusion, Zahra. I've come to the conclusion that that the single biggest litmus test of a person who I call who gets it, who gets the whole thing, is, are you eating leftovers? Because if you're eating leftovers, it means you cooked a pot of stuff and you probably ate together with your spouse or family and you had leftovers. And the single biggest driver in our current food system is single serving everything, because nobody eats together. We just get our little single service with a lot of packaging around it, a lot of plastic and packaging around a single service, and we pop it in a microwave, or we individually graze through the day because the kitchen has no relevance to the home anymore. And so that's the first thing. The second thing that consumers can do is to I encourage them to do something themselves to touch the mystery and majesty of life. Now, it might be nothing more than a little quart jar of sprouted mung beans on the windowsill. It might be nothing more than a little, you can get these little 1 foot square vermicomposting kits. You can put them under your sink, put your kitchen scraps in there, and little red worms will eat them all up and turn that into worm castings. You can put that on your, some of your potted plants you have by the windowsill. And if you got a smidgen of land, you can obviously have a couple of chickens or grow a tomato plant or something like that. But just touch the mystery and majesty of life in a visceral, in a visceral, participatory way. Just so you know that ultimately you're not in control. And that's why I'm such a fan of children's gardens. Children grow up with life at their fingertips, and they come into adulthood and think, all I got to do is manipulate these buttons and I can do anything I want to. And I can go into some sort of a Star Trek future, elevated from my ecological umbilical, and I can, get rid of all this dependency on the earth, and I don't have to worry about earthworms. And so I think that viscerally participating in something with life does this. And the third and the final thing, I think, is to simply start sleuthing and vetting. Turn off your entertainment center and take some of that entertainment budget, both time and money. Unfortunately, it doesn't take much money. And find your provenance. Whether that's searching the web to find people who will ship to you, that's becoming a big deal, or visiting a couple local farms. All right, the whole authentic or integrity food sleuthing is a skill in and of itself. And while right now you might not feel like you know enough to make those kind of decisions, well, just start. Jump in there, compare one website to another, visit a couple of farms, you see how this farmer does, how this farmer, and very soon, and you can read some books about it as well. But very soon you will become a little more educated about it, and you'll be able to vet better. So get in your kitchen, do something yourself, and and start procuring some provenance from trustworthy sources.
Hmm.
You don't have to do everything at once, but pick something. I don't know, eggs, carrots. Pick something, and say I'm gonna find this at top authenticity, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, that's such good advice. It seems, though, that as Americans have stepped away from their kitchens, the government has stepped in and started to tell us you can't use gas stoves and you can't eat meat because it's bad for the climate and you can't have a herd share or drink raw milk or things like that. So, there's just more and more kind of onerous regulations and restrictions, which a lot of people don't even know is happening. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe kind of what people can do to wake up and push back?
Sure. Oh my, you've rattled the chain of the junkyard dog here with that question. So one of the books that I've written is "Everything I Want to Do is Illegal." Notice I said everything I want to do is illegal. Some people, yeah, you wrote this book. Everything I do is illegal. No, no, no. Everything I want to do is illegal. And the subtitle is "War Stories from the Local Food Front." And the hardest thing about that book, the hardest thing about this issue, the question that you just asked is people think that we have way more food choice now than we did 100 years ago. Well, you go into Walmart, you go into Costco, look at all the food. I mean, how can you possibly say that we don't have as much choice as we did in 1900? But all of that abundance is very homogeneous. It's essentially a repackaging of very, very simple things, ingredients, corn, soybeans, sugar, flour, wheat. Okay. It's not a lot of variety. So everything in that supermarket has gone through a governmental licensing compliance program that is itself um, whatever it's constrained by an orthodoxy, by an orthodox thought. That orthodox thought is, number one, uh, we need to be sterile. That we can't have any bacteria, we can't have any living things, and so uh, so cheese you put on your table that grows mold in 2 days, that's illegal. But squeezable cheese that sits on your table for a year and doesn't grow any mold, that's perfectly fine. And so we have raw milk is Coca-Cola is perfectly safe, but raw milk is unsafe. And so I would just encourage your listeners here to understand that food safety is a highly subjective thing. Um, I see people doing what I consider very unsafe things every day, and drinking Coke, smoking, or taking their kids to a public school. Oh, we better not get into that article right now. But my point is, when you start looking at safety, um, it's an extremely subjective thing. I mean, I don't bungee jump. Okay, there are people that love to bungee jump. Okay, but it scares me to death. All right, I don't think it's safe, so I don't bungee jump. But you get my point. And we have this kind of mentality in our culture that safety is some sort of objective standard, that a bureaucrat somewhere in Washington can look at a matrix of risk and assess, well, this is safe, this is unsafe, in some sort of empirical objective way. And that is absolutely not true. And so choice, as we come to this question of of interventive government oversight to to protect us from ourselves. Um, what we have here is a decrease of food choice.
Mhm.
Uh, you can't go to the supermarket and get a pot pie from your Aunt Matilda. Um, that doesn't. Now you can get one. You can get one that comes through a great big factory commissary that jumps through all the government regulatory hoops. But Aunt Matilda's won't be on the shelf. That's what I'm talking about. And the truth is that the choice that we had 100 years ago in the food sector was triple, quadruple the choices that we have today.
Yeah.
All the neighborhood abattoirs are closed. I mean, our county had what 5 or 6 canneries in the 1930s and 40s, where you could go with your 2 bushels of green beans, run them through some nice big green bean dicers and can them, and people went there. All it was a community social neighborhood, a rallying point. These little cottage industry canneries, they're all gone.
Yeah.
uh, and so you're stuck with Jolly Green Giant and Del Monte, that sort of thing. And so our choice is fundamentally gone. And that's why I'm a big advocate of a food emancipation proclamation. Right now, our food system is shackled and enslaved to an orthodox narrative administered by FDA and USDA bureaucrats. And if you want to look, if you want to come to my farm, smell around, look around, ask around, and make a voluntary decision between 2 consenting adults for freedom of choice, and I'm using very powerful language, I understand. We should be able to have a sustenance transaction
Mhm.
without a bureaucrat in between us, and be and be okay. The problem is the government doesn't want that to happen. They don't allow that to happen. The my lights went on several years ago. It's been several years now, maybe 12, 13, time gets away. But I was at a university, speaking at a university in California, Southern California, and I was in this big lecture hall, with all these students, and during the Q&A session, just one thing kind of led to another, and it just struck me. I'm going to ask this question. I said, let me ask you guys, um, how many of you think that you should not be able to eat a carrot that you grew in your garden unless a food safety expert from the government signs off that it's okay to eat? 1/3 of the hands went up.
No.
Yeah, I had the same reaction. I was in shock. I'm a pretty verbose speaker, and I just shook my head. Now it wasn't half. Okay, it wasn't half, but it was a third. A third of this classroom of college students said that you should not be able to harvest a carrot from your own garden unless the food police comes and stacks a U.S. sticker on it, says it's okay to eat. And so that's where we are in this country. It's quite mind-boggling, actually, that we have voluntarily just given over our provenance and the fuel for our microbiome. Look, you know, I think when the government gets between my lips and my throat, that's an invasion of privacy. All right, and if there's perhaps the most intimate personal decision I make, it is what to feed my microbiome,
Yeah.
and so we don't have that choice anymore, and it needs to be rectified.
Yeah. There was a whole movement around getting the government out of the bedroom, right? That you have no place in deciding what we do in our own private lives. So, what will it take to have a movement around getting the government out of the kitchen?
Yeah, yeah. We can now choose our sex. We can choose our marriage partner. We can choose every. Yeah, you're right. For a culture that is this individual choice oriented, to be as whatever sheepish about our food issue is truly remarkable. And I think part of it is because in America, and this is fascinating. In America, we do not have a food culture. So I've traveled, I've done seminars all over the world, traveled a lot in foreign countries and stuff. And when I go there, I ask the people, of course, the first thing I'm interested in is, what are you known for? And sometimes there's some food item that's even known in some little hamlet of Italy, and
Yeah.
this is what we do. This is their big deal. And so I'm always asking about that. But I always ask my host, I said, when you think of America, what do you food, American food, what do you think of? What is signatory about American food? And I have yet to have anyone in any country of the world say anything except McDonald's. That's our food culture. And so I want you to think about for a moment that in let's just go to Europe, because Europe is where most of our American DNA is from, at least so far. You go and food is more than just a pit stop. I mean, whenever I go to Spain, I go and I tell my host I'm coming, but I have one stipulation: we have to be sitting down to dinner by 8 o'clock p.m. And so they're gracious, and they reluctantly comply with my 8 o'clock. But we're always the first person in a restaurant, and by about the time we're leaving at 10, that's when people are really coming in, and they're busy. And but they spend 2 hours eating, and conversing, and it's a big deal. Okay, whereas in America, food, we do not have that kind of cultural food identification. We consider food just an unnecessary stoppage of work for the day or play or whatever it is. Oh, I got to go eat. Like, oh man, I gotta upset my schedule by getting something to eat, and we eat on the run, and so we invented fast food. We invented McDonald's. We invented all these things to help food. And my mentor Alan Nation, who founded Stockman Grass Farmer magazine, he was quite a food student, and he said that one of the reasons that America doesn't have a food culture, or we eat to excess too, is because of royalty. So in Europe, with class systems, royalty, nobility, and then peasants, it's culturally um, a sign of wealth, that I don't eat very much because I know I'm going to get another meal down the road. And so there is a cultural idea of not eating much at a meal as a sign that I have the luxury of knowing I'm going to eat again, soon. Whereas in America, think about the colonists, the settlers, Daniel Boone, whatever, the Native Americans, okay, a lot of primitive cultures, Native Americans would eat as much as, listen to this, 7 pounds of bison in a day. When the hunting was good, they would eat as much as 7 pounds of bison in a day. And because it was always feast or famine. If it was good, they ate well, and if it wasn't, they didn't. And these younger, more primitive cultures had a more feast and famine mentality. And so, for example, in Europe, when you get done eating, the question is always, how did you like it? It's all about taste and texture and and enjoyment of the meal. In America, the question is, did you get enough? Those are very different questions, and they speak to the food culture. We do not have in this country. We do not have. Now there are regional things, grits in the South, and whatever, lobster in Maine. I mean, there are regional things, but as a culture, we do not have a food culture like most other places in the world. Our food culture is pit stop.
Yeah. How
Look
much
at,
can you eat in
you
the
know, yeah,
shortest amount of time?
exactly. How much can you eat in the shortest amount of time and get back to what's really meaningful? Because food isn't meaningful at all. I mean, look at the growth of Buc-ee's. Have you been to a Buc-ee's?
I
My
love Buc-ee's.
Oh my goodness, boy, that is like Americana, on steroids. But it speaks to that bustle, hustle,
Yeah.
get in, get out, fill your bag, and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's quite a phenomenon.
It is. It is. It speaks as well to um, the endorphin rush that you get from that plentiful, but also that sort of highly salty or highly sweet food. It's all been highly kind of manipulated to hit on the brain chemistry in a way, which I don't know if that happens outside of America, but I certainly know that our food system here is highly processed for particular
Oh,
reactions in our bodies.
yes, listen, the food processors and scientists. I mean, read about New Jersey. The food. Where red dye 29 and all these things, and they've got mechanical. I mean, read Fast Food Nation by Eric
Yes.
Schlosser. And how they've got these robots that measure mouth feel and all these things,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's all about. Uh, our whatever our historical cravings and you know in the old days, sweet was hard come by. If you
Hmm.
couldn't find honey, it was pretty much honey, and of course the tap maple trees, early on.
Right.
But sweetness was a pretty special thing, historically. And so for us to be able to just buy all the Snickers bars we want and indulge the sweet tooth is truly new territory in the human experience.
For sure. The other thing it's interesting that you're talking about Europe versus America because right now we're seeing a lot of pushback against that government intrusion coming from farmers in Europe. I mean, the streets of Germany right now are filled with tractors and farmers, and there's lots of support from other people pushing back on that government intrusion. And it happened in the Netherlands, and it's not happening here. And you sort of talked a little bit about some of the pressures that farmers are under and even the social pressures within that community. But do you think that might ever come here?
Boy, that's why I think this discussion about food culture is so powerful, because in Europe, don't mess with my cheese. I mean, that's a big
Yeah.
deal. Whereas in America, uh, we're not even we're not even willing to put our cheese in a shredder. We won't even buy a block of cheese. We go and buy baggies of pre-shredded cheese,
Yeah.
or cheese-like
Yeah.
substances at least. And so yeah, I would like to think that Americans would step up to this challenge, but boy, when you look at what's already been happening in our food system, I mean, from factory farming. Now it's true in Europe that they do have factory farming, but they're way smaller. They do confine most of their animals, especially in the Netherlands and Germany, Austria. Most of the animals are confined, and they bring in food to them, but they're way smaller, and so that makes a big difference,
Hmm.
whether you have a house full of 5,000 chickens versus a house full of 20,000 chickens, for example,
Yeah.
or five houses together of 100,000 chickens. So a lot of it, scale does matter. I
Hmm.
mean, think about your kitchen. If you're just cooking for your family, it's fairly easy to keep things wiped down and the cupboards clean and the floor clean. But if you're suddenly cooking for 100 people, man, there's going to be toma- tomato juice on the floor. There's going to be some lettuce leaves, and it's going to be hard to keep things wiped down. And so when you're dealing with biology, scale does make a difference, and that's why in the living world, scale is achieved by duplication, not by centralization.
Hmm.
And so what you have is a spreading out basically a democratization across the landscape rather than centralization. So even in the bison, but there were whatever 100 million bison, they were in multiple herds spread across. There weren't 100. All the 100 million bison weren't in one group. They were spread across the landscape in some, obviously some really really big groups, but there were the ones in that went up from Mexico up into Saskatchewan through California, and then there were the ones that went from Florida up into Quebec, up into Canada. I mean, obviously before Quebec and Canada were named or in their modern times, but there were and then there were the Midwestern bison that went between Alabama and Alberta up into Manitoba, and so you had these ranges, and so that's a fundamental difference in our food system. But yeah, the American consumer right now, on average, is completely clueless about how food is raised, how it's grown, and the nutritional quality of it. But people come to this. I mean, obviously, the world that I live in, I meet people who come to this. It might be an autistic child, it might be a food allergy, it might be a cancer, it might be something, and they exhaust conventional medicine or whatever, and next thing you know, here they are, looking at herbal remedies, they're looking at lifestyle changes, all sorts of things. And so I meet these people all the time who have a moment of kind of mental conversion. The lights go on, they have their epiphany, their aha moment, and it's just one at a time. And I would like to think that the trajectories that we currently see with degenerative disease, with childhood, with cancer now coming in earlier and earlier, and lots. I mean, the Wall Street Journal's writing about this stuff, and the doctors say, "Well, we're baffled. We're baffled." Well, you can't look. In 1940, here's a good one for you. In 1940, Americans consumed 1 million pounds of monosodium glutamate (MSG). Okay, you can't make MSG in your kitchen. Look, if what you're eating can't be made in your kitchen, you probably shouldn't eat it. I mean, that's like a rule of thumb. Okay, so in 1940, 1 million pounds of MSG. This year, or in 2023, Americans consumed 300 million pounds of MSG. 300 million pounds. From 1940, 1 million to last year, 300 million. Yeah. Now, there's only about 340 million people in in the U.S. I mean, our population is like 340 million. So think about that. 300 million is almost a pound per person in a year. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this is and MSG has been linked to all sorts of things, from cancer to all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that it goes kind of back to your question about the government intervention. The problem is that that people the average person is asleep at the wheel. They assume the FDA is taking care of us. They assume the USDA is taking care of us. They assume the Centers for Disease Control is taking care of us. Well, the best thing that happened about 2020 was that 36% of the population said, "I don't believe you. And I'm not taking your thing, and I'm not buying it, and Fauci, you can go take a hike." And so I was absolutely, in retrospect, I think that whole black swan event woke up a lot of people, and in fact, there are probably a lot of people right now who took injections who wish they hadn't. Yeah. And so, these are the kinds of societal drips. I always say that people come to better food when that final drip, and the first drip, is some little drip, then another drip and another drip, and then finally they get this final drip that, oh, okay, now I'm getting dripped on. I need to move. I need to make a change,
Yeah.
and usually something fearful, fearing for their health of their child, fearing for their own health. Uh, Fear drives them to a place, but faith makes them stop. Fear moves you. It moves you out of your current zone, but you can't run away forever. You have to finally stop somewhere. And so faith then moves in to let us embrace a new haven, a new harbor, a new anchor point. And that's one of the things that's driving the current homestead tsunami of people that are migrating from the city out into a rural place, getting 3 or 4 acres. They can have their garden and a few chickens and a hive of bees, and they can disentangle for a system that they realize has quite nefarious agendas,
Yeah.
and is not looking out for their best interests.
Yeah, absolutely. COVID for sure was a crisis, but also an opportunity. And I really do think that it helped a lot of people understand how fragile our system was, that sort of
Yes.
just in time delivery, but also a big one, as you mentioned, was the sort of vaccine issue. And I think more and more people are now very wary of what they're putting in their own bodies. But then that leads to also what's going into the bodies of the animals that we eat. And so people are
Sure.
concerned now about, as you said, mRNA vaccines in animals and stuff like that. You just wrote a blog post recently about the very few times that you've had to vaccinate animals on your farm and how really that came down to more farmer error than anything. Can you just
Yes.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, some people on my team were not really happy about me sharing that intimately with people, but I think that transparency is good. That vulnerability helps you to, and it expresses our own growth. We haven't had any of these problems now for 20 years, but um, the bottom line there was that every time we've had a major animal whatever disease outbreak, every time it's been our fault. So we had a group of chickens once that we raised. We had a terrible spring. We couldn't get them outside in time because the weather was cold and wet. They got crowded in the brooder. A lady had asked us to raise an extra 500, so we had a bunch more than we had planned for, and they got crowded and they got Merrick's disease from unhygienic, unsanitary conditions. And so for 3 years, we vaccinated our chicks for Merrick's. It's actually a fairly weak, virus. But we wanted to just vaccinate for a couple of years just till we could kind of make sure we got ahead of it, and we did, and then we quit. One of the most dramatic was a group of calves that we had taken over to a new rental farm that was owned by a real rabid environmentalist, and it had a bunch of overgrown blackberries, 12 feet tall, massive blackberry patches that, of course, we couldn't graze in. They didn't let grass grow. We considered them, a weed, a problem. These brambles, these blackberries, but he wanted to keep them for the, bird habitat and rabbits and things like that. So he wouldn't let us mow them. So we said, well, I know what we'll do. We'll put the salt box in there, let the cows tromp them out, and we'll, over a few years, we'll gradually just kind of, change the landscape kind of quietly and be able to do this. Well, we took these calves over there, I don't know, 70 or 80 of them, and they were there about a week, and then all of a sudden we lost one. And these were big, these were like 600-pound calves. Okay, these weren't just weanlings or little baby calves or anything. These were what we call stockers. And next day, lost another one. Oh man, what's going on here? And next day went over, lost two. Well, we don't lose. You don't lose calves once they're born and they're up and running. Pretty much they're pretty trouble free. And so we called the vet, and in 5 minutes he sliced one open and said it's blackleg. So he said the only cure is vaccination. Everybody around vaccinates for blackleg, and so anyway, so we vaccinated them the next day, and it stopped them, but it didn't sit well with me. He said, we're not going to, we haven't vaccinated. We're not going to start this. We're not going to, I don't like the idea that we're going to have to start vaccinating these cows.
Yeah.
And so behind me is a bookshelf, and one of the things I do is collect like pre-1950 ag books. So I
Mhm.
got a whole shelf full of them. So I went to my section, my old, cattle, beef cattle section, and let's look at blackleg. So, blackleg. And every one of them, vaccinate. It's ubiquitous in the soil. It's a protozoa that, attacks, blah, 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 blah. And I'm getting really discouraged. I'm looking at book after book after book, and it's all just the same thing, same thing. Last book, last sentence says it generally enters the body through an anaerobic puncture wound, often caused by brambles. Oh my goodness. I mean, it was like an answer from heaven, right? And immediately I said, okay, well, we turned these calves into pin cushions, overrode their immune system. It was too much, too fast.
Mhm.
So we went to the landowner and showed him, and he said, "Oh, sure, mow them down." We mowed them down. We've never used a vaccine, haven't lost any since, and that's 20 years ago. So,
Right.
so my point is that every disease we've had has been our fault, and in other words, the diseases are not because the animals were pharmaceutically disadvantaged.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Or there's some sort of unseen outside force that's trying to
yeah,
come and get you. It goes back to growing your own carrot. If
yeah,
you are controlling the hygiene of your soil and the fertility of your soil and you're growing that carrot, you know what's going into it. You should know what's coming out of it.
sure, sure. And so many times when you see press releases, high path avian influenza or whatever, the industry press release is almost like there are nefarious fairies hovering above these farms, and let's pick this one. We're going to drop high path avian flu in. No, 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 no. That farmer, that management, that system, that model overrode the animal's immune system and created the problem
Right.
every single time. But you will never see a bulletin from the government say, I wonder if we could stop this disease by putting the animals on pasture and moving them around on clean ground, and they'd get fresh air and sunshine, and some exercise. You never hear that from the orthodoxy, from the conventional establishment. Never.
And it ties right into the advice we were given when COVID hit as well. Instead
Yes.
of saying, get outside, get some vitamin D, vitamin D is highly protective against
Yes.
getting the virus. They said, stay inside and make sure you get your shots.
Listen, every day during that time, I just dreamed, I fantasized. Wouldn't it be cool if Fauci would step to that microphone one time and he would say, hey, America, listen, we're going to try an experiment. Listen, everybody with me here? Okay. Everybody listening? All right, we're going to try an experiment. We're going to do 1 month. Here's our experiment. For 1 month, first of all, we're not going to eat any sugary soft drinks, high fructose corn syrup, Coca-Cola, Mountain Dew. We're not going to eat any of that junk. And we're going to cook from scratch. We're going to cook from scratch for a month. Get good, just unprocessed, cook it from scratch. Um, Secondly, we're going to sleep. We're all deprived of sleep, so we're going to sleep for 8 hours a night. Go to bed early and sleep. Get a full 8 hours of sleep. And we don't get enough exercise, so we're going to everybody let's work up a sweat 20 minutes a day. Just do, whether you walk, run in place, lift weights, whatever you want to do, but work up a sweat for 20 minutes. Sweat, pulls the toxins out of your body, gets everything running and the organs running good and all that. And we're not getting enough sun, so go outside for 20 minutes a day. And in fact, you can combine the sun with your sweat. Do a vigorous constitutional walk for 20 minutes. You get sun, and you get exercise as well. And then we're all dehydrated, so let's all drink about 3 quarts of water a day, or at least 2 quarts, a half a gallon a day. We're all going to drink 2 gallons to rehydrate, because we're all dehydrated. And then we're all stressed about this. So I'll tell you what, let's do. If for every 1 hour of news that you watch, depressing news, you have to watch 2 hours of comedy. So time yourself. If you watch 30 minutes of news, you go out to watch 1.5 hours. Where we're going to laugh twice as long as we cry. Okay, and we're going to try that for a while, and then the last thing is, you know um, uh, make a list of all the people that you dislike, that have done you wrong, that, man, you just, that person. Make a list of those people and forgive them. We're just going to forgive them. Okay. And America, let's try that for 1 month and let's see what happens. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine? Wouldn't that have been cool?
It would have been amazing. And I have a great idea. Joel Salatin for president. But if you want to see a food revolution in this country, it would be to tell people to do all of those things. Don't drink your Mountain Dew, don't eat your Doritos, go outside. That's when people would actually fight back, it seems. So maybe
Yeah.
I'm a bit cynical, but um
Yeah.
I think we're coming close to the end of the hour, and I'm so enjoying this conversation. I don't want it to end, but to be fair to you, I will bring it to a close. But I wanted to ask you about one thing that you're involved in, which is the Rogue Food Conference.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this philosophy that we have all these government rules, and as we kind of crumble under the weight of our own highly complex system, the only thing the government seems to be able to do is throw more rules at us. And so
Right.
you're kind of encouraging people to think creatively for workarounds. So not to break the law, but to do things in creative ways. So tell us a little bit about that and some of the examples of the guerrilla tactics you've seen.
Yeah. So Zahra, you're right. There comes a time when tyranny comes to a point that it's more efficient to circumvent than it is to comply. And people like us, little small food producers, and we're kind of outside the mainstream, and we have tried for decades to comply with an ever lengthening set of government regulations and licenses. And you try to comply, you try, but eventually those rules and regulations and frankly the prejudice within the oversight fraternity becomes so onerous that you finally throw up your hands and say, forget compliance. How can we circumvent the whole thing? And this is what happened, for example, in the homeschool movement, 40 years ago, or goodness, 50 years ago, when the last homeschool movement was starting. People tried to work with their teachers. They tried to work with their principal, tried to change the books, tried to change the curriculum. And finally they threw up and said, forget it. We're going to just opt out. We're going to go to homeschooling or Christian school or, some completely different thing. And we're approaching that in the food. I see today the food system right now, where the education system was 50 years ago and pushed people out of it and created the homeschool movement. We're at that point now in the food system. And fortunately, the beautiful thing about the homeschool movement is the homeschool movement won. They didn't close down the public schools, okay, but they carved out. They got enough political clout that they carved out for themselves exemptions and freedoms that would have been unthinkable even 10 years before Homeschool Legal Defense Association, Mike Ferris, and all that group really kind of took the reins and ran for it. And so that's where we are in the food movement today. And so about 4 years ago, I approached John Moody, a friend, and I said, John, what we need is a rogue food movement. We need to come alongside. The small food producers, artisanal producers, craft food producers are being pummeled by the plethora of government regulations and scaled prejudicial licenses and compliance forms. We need to come alongside and feature the innovative people who have figured out workarounds and have said, you know what, we're going to start our own school. We're going to just opt out of the system, and we're not going to ask for a license. We're not going to see how we can fit into an industrial system. We're just going to create a parallel universe, a totally different situation. And so we started this, and boy, this thing has just taken off. It's got legs. And we have featured all sorts of people who have figured out workarounds, everything from labeling their food as pet food to doing personal membership associations, PMAs, to selling live animals and having an agreement where I'll keep the guts, you take the meat. So I'm processing my own animal, you're taking the meat, and I'm keeping the guts. To just we have a lady in North Carolina, Anithi Bali, that started a food church, 501c3 food church. You join the church, and your membership gives you things. John Moody started the food club in Louisville, Kentucky. They've got everything in there illegal you can imagine. The government wants to close them down, but what they've done is figured out a way that the food, that the transaction is not a sale; it's an investment. And so the legal terminology where the government comes in and gets you is in sale, food in commerce. For example, I can butcher a pig in the backyard, make sausage, and give you sausage. That's perfectly fine. But if I sell you, then I'm a criminal. And so it's a transaction of money. It's the in sale, in commerce that they can regulate. And so there are all sorts of clever ideas and workarounds so that we can transact that package of sausage, but it's not considered a sale. And so we are featuring the leaders in the movement, the best minds that we can find, practitioners that have fought the fight, have won the battle, and are moving forward. So the next one is coming up in May. It'll be May. What am I here? May the 18th. May the 18th here at Polyface. Last year we had 400 people. We turned away 200. So get your ticket early. But this year, Congressman Thomas Massie will be here. He's a favorite, of course, all the time. And Catherine Austin Fitts, the founder of Solari, is going to be our keynoter. So we're going to have some heavy hitters. I've invited Craig Hickman, the senator from Maine, who wrote the Maine Food Sovereignty Act. Wonderful, articulate, sharp guy. So this thing, again, this will be our seventh or eighth one. I think now we're moving it around the country. We had our first one in the Pacific Northwest. In the fall, we'll be in Dallas, Texas, with one. But we're trying to do 2 a year in different parts of the country. Well, it looks like it's a permanent fixture here in Virginia at our farm. We're kind of central, to the Mid-Atlantic region, lots of people around. But man, if you ever, I'll tell your listeners, if you ever want to spend a day drinking from a Liberty fire hose, this is the place to come, and to find and fellowship with other knees that haven't bowed to Baal. It's truly a remarkable time. And I thank you for asking about it. Rogue Food Conference tickets go on sale. Either I think they're already on, or they start the next day or so. And love to see folks come and get energized and empowered and encouraged and inspired to just not bow, to pursue their own dreams and entrepreneurial opportunities without regard to government blessing.
Amen. That's amazing. We would love to be there, but sounds like an amazing event. Just before I close, have you heard of Texas Slim and the Beef Initiative and their efforts? Yeah, so they're part of that, building that parallel economy as well. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Texas, what they're doing, so they are the other end of that spectrum. They are trying to create templates to enable small scale operators to become compliant, and I have no problem with that. I'm a yes to all this. Okay. Because different people have different callings, they have different abilities, different talents, and so I don't function well with committees and licensing people. I'm a bit of a libertarian rogue, but there are other people who see a pathway. Hey, we can create protocols and just people will and make licensing real easy and enable people. Well, that's fine also. I mean, I co-own a federal inspected slaughterhouse, so I'm dealing with inspectors. I don't like it, but I'm kind of in both of those worlds, and I appreciate all those. So I'm for whatever um, encourages and facilitates authentic food opportunities, I'm for it. And so, yeah, Texas Slim is definitely on my radar.
Awesome. 100%. Great. How can people get in touch with you or find out more about what you do?
So I don't have a personal website. I'm a luddite. In fact, I'll show you my phone, my phone. So there's
I
there's
love
my
it.
there's my phone. All right. So I don't even have a smartphone, but you can find out all about me through our website, Polyface Farms, Polyface. Yes. And you just pop that in, and it's a very comprehensive website. It has everything from food to events and gatherings and things like that. And where I'm traveling and speaking, I have a pretty heavy travel speaking schedule, and I'd love to meet you and anyone else listening at your place. And so yeah, hopefully our paths will
We
cross.
would love
And
that.
but Polyface Farms is where you can find out more about
Fantastic.
me.
Thank you so much, Joel. It's just been such a thrill to have you, and we're so grateful that you took the time. We know how busy you are, but super amazing to meet you.
Thank you. Likewise, it's been an honor to be with you, and blessings on all your endeavors. I hope your viewership grows to 1 million in a
Thank you
year.
so much. Wow. So that truly was a thrill for me. Joel is just a legend. Let us know what you thought of that discussion in the comments. And if you have any questions, pop them in. And please make sure you like and subscribe as well so more people can see this video and help us get to that million. Check us out as well on Substack at collapselife.substack.com. We put several articles out a week there. We're also on Twitter at collapse_life. So be sure to follow us there. Collapsed Life is a thinking person's guide to civilization and demise. It's about opening eyes, taking control, and taking action to be ready for whatever is to come. And we're so grateful for the opportunity to talk to people like Joel, and we can't wait to bring you more incredible guests like that. Until then, remember to keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.